They say the camera never lies, but it also never asks who's left out of the frame. My sister used to joke that I was the blur in every photo. Not just a photo bomber, just a smudge in her spotlight. I laughed once, maybe the first time she said it. That laugh didn't last long, because eventually I started to wonder if that's all I'd ever be. Back in 6th grade, our yearbook had this glossy page with Savannah smack dab in the middle, arms slung around her science trophy, face glowing like she was made of golden hour light. I was there too, technically. Cropped out, just my elbow peeking in like a forgotten thought. I kept the page anyway. For years, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Later, I knew better. It was the spring of our senior year. Eugene High had that smell of blooming dogwoods and polished gym floors, the kind that made you feel like something important was about to happen, even if it never happened to you. That evening, the auditorium was packed. Students and parents filled every fold-out chair. Teachers huddled near the stage, whispering over clipboards. The air had a pressure to it, like you were supposed to be proud, supposed to smile, supposed to pretend this mattered to you. Savannah took the stage, of course. She always took the stage. Let's give it up for the senior class president, captain of the debate team, and full scholarship recipient to Stanford University, Savannah Hartley. The vice principal beamed, practically vibrating with admiration. Applause erupted. I clapped too, because that's what you do when you're the sister in the audience. Not the one they call up. Not the one they give flowers to. Just the one who brought the bobby pins this morning when Savannah's curls wouldn't stay in place. She walked up like she owned the floorboards beneath her feet. In heels she made me paint the night before. She didn't even look nervous, just radiant and polished, like she'd already left us all behind in her mind. "Thank you," she began, voice perfectly pitched for the microphone. I wouldn't be here without so many people who pushed me forward. My parents, my amazing teachers, and of course, my sister, Noelle, who somehow made it into almost every childhood photo, usually as a blur in the background. She laughed. She's always been my unofficial photo bomber. Laughter rippled through the auditorium. Even my parents chuckled. My mom nudged my dad like it was the cutest thing ever. He leaned in and whispered something that made her snort. No one looked at me. Not even once. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just sat there, still as stone, hands folded so tightly my knuckles ached. The applause went on. My name wasn't mentioned again. After the ceremony, families swarmed the stage. Balloons, bouquets, camera flashes. The hall buzzed with congratulations. I wandered through it like a ghost. No one stopped me. No one asked to take a picture with me. And then I saw it on the bulletin board outside the auditorium. A new photo from that night, already printed and pinned. Savannah holding her award, her smile so wide it barely fit in the frame. And me? I was there. Behind her. Out of focus. Again. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't angry. Not even sad. Just gone. Like maybe if I stopped breathing, no one would notice until the air got too still. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my room. The one Savannah used when she wanted to borrow light for her selfies. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Pale. Quiet. Small. "Do they even see me?" I whispered. The words left my lips but hung heavy in the silence. No answer came. Being invisible isn't peaceful. It's exhausting. You start to wonder if you're fading by accident or if someone decided a long time ago that you weren't meant to be seen. My high school counselor once said I reminded her of still water. Quiet. Unmoving. Deep. Then she paused and added, "Still waters drown things." She said it like a compliment. I nodded like I agreed. That night, after the honors ceremony, the kitchen smelled like stew. The same kind Mom always made when something special happened. Birthdays, holidays, when Savannah got another certificate for the fridge. The scent was familiar, heavy with garlic and the kind of carrots that stayed too firm in the center. It was always too much rosemary, too little salt. But we ate it anyway. I sat at the table, my camera slung across my shoulder, still capped. I hadn't taken a single photo that evening. Not at the ceremony. Not of Savannah's beaming face. Not of my parents clapping hands. But the camera hung there, like a buffer between me and the rest of the room. Like glass I could hide behind. Savannah, Mom said, ladling the stew into her bowl, your speech was just perfect. You have such poise up there. My dad barely looked up from his phone. Stanford'll be lucky to have you, he murmured, scrolling. Savannah just grinned, the kind that spread too wide. I almost tripped getting on stage, she said with a laugh. But then I remembered to keep my chin high. That's what they say, right? No one asked how my night was. No one noticed I hadn't taken off my coat. I stirred the stew. It had 3 flavors, hers, his, and whatever was left over. Mom always said it was 3 parts perfect. My part was the one she adjusted afterward. Later, in my room, I sat on the floor beside my bookshelf. It held row after row of photo albums, most of them organized by date. Summers at the lake. Halloween costumes. Backyard cookouts. I flipped open one from middle school. Savannah's grin greeted me like an old habit. Page after page, she glowed, arms flung wide, always at the center. I was there too, sometimes. You could tell by a wrist. A shoe. Once, the back of my head. Then I pulled out a photo from my 6th grade class. It was supposed to be a big moment. The science fair winners. Savannah had insisted we both wear blue that day, so we look like a team, she said. She won first place for a volcano that exploded too early. I came in second for a compost project nobody paid attention to. In the picture, her shoulder had taken up half the frame. My face was cut right at the nose. I used to believe staying quiet helped keep things calm. That swallowing words made me easier to live with. That holding the peace was the same thing as being part of it. But that night, I held that photo in my lap and realized something else. Maybe staying quiet just made me easier to ignore. Camera with flash bonus detail. I used to take pictures of everyone. Mom humming in the garden, Dad asleep on the porch, Savannah with birthday candles mid-blow. But there wasn't one photo of me that anyone else had taken. Not one where I wasn't behind the lens, adjusting the light, cropping myself out. There was a time, around my 11th birthday, when I thought maybe that would change. I'd asked for my own necklace, something just mine. Instead, Mom handed me a tiny velvet pouch with Savannah's initials already etched on the charm. It's practically new, she smiled. And you're so plain, sweetheart. Simple things suit you better. I thanked her, wore it twice, then tucked it deep in a drawer behind expired film rolls. Still water doesn't ripple, but it drowns quietly. There used to be a comfort in early mornings, when the gym was still half asleep and the halls hadn't yet filled with voices. I liked that quiet, when I could lace up my shoes and move through the world unnoticed. The locker room was cold, tiled, and fluorescent, but it felt like mine. That morning, I got there early. Volleyball practice wasn't until 7, but I slipped in a little after 6. I told myself it was for the extra stretching. The truth was, I just needed space. After the ceremony, after Savannah's speech, after the silence at home, I needed air no one else had touched yet. The lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a pale yellow. Rows of metal lockers lined the walls like teeth. I sat down on the bench by mine, adjusting my knee brace, then pulling out a granola bar I didn't really want. Then I heard it. The click. It wasn't the usual kind, like a locker being opened. It was the distinct, deliberate sound of the main door closing. The kind of click that tells you you're no longer alone. I looked up. Carter. Savannah's boyfriend, if that's what you could call him. Always around, always watching. The kind of guy who smiled like he was doing you a favor. I never liked him, but I never thought he'd follow me here. And he wasn't alone. 2 other guys were with him, neither from our school, I realized later. One had a hoodie pulled low, the other wore a Letterman jacket from a different district. Their steps echoed too loudly, too confidently. "Hey," Carter said, his voice too casual. "Early bird gets the bruise, huh?" I stood, slowly. "You shouldn't be in here." He chuckled. "Savannah told me you've been acting a little bold lately. Big speeches in your head. Eyes full of judgment. Maybe it's time someone reminded you who's center stage." I stepped back. The guy in the hoodie moved fast. Not a punch, just a shove. Sharp and direct. I stumbled backward into the lockers, hitting the edge hard. Something split near my eyebrow, and I felt the warmth before I saw the red. I didn't scream. I slid down, one hand catching the floor, the other clutching the corner of my face. The metal tasted sour in my mouth. The click of the locker door closing again sounded behind me louder than anything else. It echoed like the end of something I didn't know I'd still been holding onto. They didn't stay long. Maybe that was the plan, shock and vanish. Maybe that was all Savannah needed them to do. I stayed where I was, trying to understand the shape of what had just happened. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden absence of certainty. The room that had once been a hiding place now felt hollow. Like the world had flipped and I hadn't moved an inch. Then a voice panicked. "Noelle." "Bailey." She ran in, her gym bag thudding to the floor. Her sneakers squeaked against the tile as she knelt beside me. "Oh my God, what happened?" "Who?" "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't. I let her press tissues to the cut, then a cold pack from the nurse's mini fridge. Her hands moved quickly, gently, like she'd done this before. I didn't ask why. We sat there for a while. She didn't push me to speak, and I didn't offer anything more. The locker room filled with the hum of the lights again, and the air felt too still. I stared at my palms. Blood had dried along the creases, staining the skin like ink. I should have been scared, or humiliated, or furious. But all I felt was hollow, because it wasn't just the hit. It was what came before it. Savannah's words. The calculation in Carter's voice. The way no one would believe me if I told them. I didn't cry. I just breathed. And I knew then, Savannah sent him. I came home with stitches. They asked me not to ruin her year. The dining room smelled like grilled steak and cheap vinaigrette. Well, cheap intended vinaigrette. Mom had forgotten the dressing again, so we sat there chewing on dry lettuce leaves while pretending it was a full meal. Savannah wasn't home. She'd gone to some scholarship mixer with Carter, like nothing had happened. Like the same guy who shoved me into a locker and walked away without flinching was just her sweet, supportive boyfriend again. I eased into my chair carefully, the bandage on my forehead tugging slightly when I turned. The doctor said 4 stitches. No concussion. Lucky. That's what he called it, lucky. Mom noticed, finally, and gave a little wince. It still hurts, honey? I nodded once, then reached for my water. The glass left a ring on the table. No one moved to wipe it. It's just, she glanced at Dad before continuing. This week is very important for your sister. She has her Stanford interview. And with everything riding on it, we really can't. Well, let's not escalate. Escalate? I said, my voice calm, too calm. Dad cleared his throat. He hadn't looked up from his steak. We just mean, let's keep things from getting blown out of proportion. No need to bring attention that might affect Savannah's future. I looked down at my plate. The steak was well done, the way Savannah liked it. Tough, almost bitter. I'd asked for medium once and was told the oven didn't have time for preferences. Noelle, Mom continued, I'm sure Carter didn't mean anything. He said you looked disoriented. Maybe you slipped? The locker rooms can be so slick in the mornings. I didn't respond. I didn't nod or blink or breathe too loud. Just silence. Thick, pressing, familiar. Dad added, we all know you can be a little sensitive. That's not a bad thing. But sometimes you internalize too much. Like the time you cried over the parking space, Mom said, trying to sound amused. I set my fork down gently. You always take things too personally. Savannah had once told me when I was 9 and she'd torn my favorite poster. It's just a thing, Noelle. Let it go. But it wasn't just a thing. It was the accumulation. The little dismissals, the brushed-off injuries, the gaslighting so casual it wore a smile. The door clicked open. Savannah walked in, heels light against the wood floor, eyes shining with just enough triumph to twist the air. Oh, you're up, she said casually, hanging her purse. Carter told me what happened. You okay? I looked at her. She didn't flinch. I heard you slipped, she added, pouring herself water. He was worried you looked off. The room watched me like a test subject. I stood slowly, gathered the empty plates, and walked them to the sink. The faucet groaned. The water was too cold. I let it run anyway. Behind me, no one spoke. The salad bowl still sat on the table, wilted greens, no dressing. No dressing, I said under my breath, scrubbing a plate. Just like the truth in this house. Later that night, I sat on my bed, laptop open. My notebook was beside me, the page folded neatly to a line I'd written earlier. They don't want peace. They want quiet. And maybe I had given them quiet for long enough. I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked. I stared at it, then slowly typed, "This is what happened to me." It felt small, but also like the beginning of something big. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. Just to be seen, finally, on my own terms. The cursor blinked again. And this time, I didn't. Everyone expected me to forget. But I was a photographer before I was a victim. They never noticed the camera. Not really. To them, it was a quirky little habit. Just Noelle clicking away at flowers, taking pictures of trees or dinner plates, of the way light hit a spoon or the steam rising from Mom's stew. Just background noise. Just me. But cameras don't forget. My room was quiet that night, just the buzz of the desk lamp and the soft thud of my feet crossing the carpet. I had pulled out the old shoebox where I used to store backup memory cards and half-finished photo projects. It smelled faintly of dust and citrus gum. I flipped open the lid and dug until I found it, one of those tiny black SD cards from my freshman year. It had slipped between the pages of a journal once. I had nearly tossed it last spring during one of Mom's room resets. I slid it into the reader and waited. The files loaded slowly, like they were reluctant to reveal what they'd seen. And then, there they were. Images from the school's spring assembly. I hadn't remembered filming, but apparently I had. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because I felt something coming even then. One video in particular stood out. Blurry, shaky, yes. But still, there in the frame, unmistakable. Carter pushing someone forward, my body catching the locker just out of view, and a smear of motion where my head met metal. You couldn't see the blood, but you could hear the sound. That cold clack of impact. The flinch of Bailey's gasp moments later. I pressed pause. Then I hit save. Twice. The next morning, I skipped study hall and walked the long way to the photography lab. Mr. Holman looked surprised to see me. "Noelle," he said, blinking behind his thick glasses. "Everything okay? Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. My voice was steady, but I kept my camera bag close, zipped shut. We sat at his cluttered desk. I slid the flash drive across the wood surface. I need to know how to store these without them getting deleted. Or found. He didn't ask what was on it. He just nodded slowly, opening the laptop on his desk. "You want secure backups. External. Cloud. Maybe 2 encrypted ones. I can show you how." I watched his fingers move over the keyboard like someone tuning a quiet piano. "There's a lot of noise in the world, Noelle," he said while the files transferred. "But the truth tends to hum under it, waiting for someone to amplify it." Bailey met me after last period. We went straight to the print lab. No questions, just action. That's the kind of friend she was. One by one, we printed them, 12 images in total. Some were stills from old events. Some were from locker room hallways, hall monitors looking the other way. One was just Savannah mid-sentence, with a smug curve to her lip and me in the far corner, clearly recoiling. Another showed Carter at last year's bonfire, his arm around Savannah, his other hand too close to the hem of my jacket. Each image wasn't conclusive, but together, they started telling a pattern. That night, I laid them out across my bedroom floor. The lamp cast a circle of light that made the glossy paper gleam. I sat in the middle, cross-legged, knees stiff. Around me, a dozen photos fanned out like evidence in a courtroom that didn't exist yet. They were memories, yes. But more than that, they were records. Of harm, of patterns, of permission given by silence. I glanced at the mirror on my wall, the one I usually ignored. For the first time, it didn't just reflect a girl hiding. It showed someone preparing. Someone who'd stopped flinching. I wasn't just preserving memories. I was preparing for war. The school's art corridor wasn't built for confession. Just plaster and pin wards, a few track lights overhead humming like tired secrets. Still, there was something sacred in how the space held silence, how students passed slowly, eyes drifting from sketch to painting, pausing only when something truly unsettled them. Each of us had been given one panel, 30 inches wide, 5 feet tall. Most kids pasted poems, abstract color pieces, collages of flowers or political quotes. I used mine for photographs. 12 images, printed clean, matte finish. No captions. Just faces. Motions. Unnamed stories until you looked close enough to recognize the body language. I arranged them in chronological order, a silent timeline. Top left, Savannah standing at a school rally, Carter in the background, too close to me. Bottom center, the infamous locker shot, blurred elbow, steel door, red smudge. To anyone else, it might have looked like a moody experiment in light and shadows. But not to those who knew. Mr. Holman walked by around third period, hands in his cardigan pockets. He paused in front of my board, nodded once, and said only, "Photography is how we scream without raising our voices." Then he moved on. During lunch, the hallway began to hum. At first, it was just 1 or 2 students. Then more. I caught snippets. "Wait, is that? Did you see the bruise in the third one?" No names, but I know. No one touched the board. Not yet. But their glances were longer. their voices quieter. I stood nearby, pretending to read a neighboring project on climate activism. Every once in a while, I'd look sideways and catch someone staring at my photos with their lips slightly parted, as if realizing something that had always been in front of them, but never quite in focus. Savannah showed up just before sixth period. Her boots echoed too confidently on the tile. She stopped in front of the display and tilted her head. Then she smiled, not the kind that reaches your eyes, but the kind people wear when they think they still have power. "You've always liked attention," she said smoothly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My reply was already hanging on the wall behind her. She lingered for a moment longer, then walked away, her perfume thick with eucalyptus and something sharp underneath. A junior named Elise, someone from the photography club, came up to me right after. She pointed to one of the middle photos, the one where my reflection showed faintly in the trophy case, half hidden behind Savannah's back. "Is that you in the glass?" she asked quietly. I nodded. She looked down, then back at me. "It's brave." Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed, like I'd peeled off my skin and nailed it to a board for the whole school to interpret. But hearing her say that made something in my ribs expand just a little. That night, I came back to the corridor. Technically, we weren't allowed after dark unless part of an event. But I had a hallway pass, a nervous stomach, and a tin of muffins, my nervous habit food. Blueberry, slightly burnt on the edges. Half the photos were gone, ripped clean from the board. The tape hung like rejected truths, curling slightly at the corners. My reflection photo was among the missing. I stood there for a long time, not shocked, not devastated, just still. Then I reached into my tin and pulled out a muffin. I set it down gently on the floor under the empty space, like a peace offering. Or a dare. I didn't cry. I didn't replace the photos, not yet. Somewhere out there, someone had seen enough to be afraid. And that, I decided, was confirmation. I was being heard. I didn't file a complaint. I wrote a truth no one could deny. Monday morning started the same way it always did, fluorescent lights flickering in the hallway, the smell of powdered coffee from the teacher's lounge leaking into the air. But by second bell, something had changed. Right next to the school's daily bulletin board, usually covered in club meeting notices and SAT prep flyers, was a photo. A large, black and white printout. Uncaptioned. Unclaimed. Undeniable. It was the locker photo. The moment after I hit the metal edge, you could see my figure, blurry at the bottom corner, blood at the hairline. Carter's sneakers mid-step. The twisted expressions of the two boys he brought with him. No one signed it. No watermark. Just silence printed in ink. I hadn't told Bailey I was going to do it. I hadn't even told myself. The Friday before, I sat at my desk long past midnight. I didn't cry or pace or overthink. I just gathered the images, opened an anonymous email account, and typed, "To whom it may concern, this is not a complaint. This is a record. A mirror. A refusal to stay edited out." Attached were 12 photos. A few short video clips from the camera I always kept in my bag. A link to a private folder. Then I clicked send to principal.reynolds@eugenists.edu. CC, school board, ethics@district.net. That Monday, someone else, maybe the office secretary, maybe a teacher, had printed one of the photos and tacked it to the board. By lunch, whispers filled the halls like wind moving through tall grass. "Did you see the locker pic? Carter's in it. You can tell by his shoes. Savannah's not in the frame, but..." The teachers tried to pretend it wasn't there. I watched Mr. Angler, the history teacher, pause in front of it, blink, then keep walking. Mrs. Sanchez muttered something under her breath before pulling a sticky note over part of the image. But no one removed it completely. Not yet. Savannah was pulled from third period. I watched through the library window as she walked toward the main office, flanked by Miss Kersey and the vice principal. Her arms folded, her expression unreadable. When she came back an hour later, nothing had changed on the surface. She sat in her usual seat, adjusted her collar, and didn't look in my direction once. There was no formal announcement, no disciplinary slips, no apology, but silence began to feel different. It wasn't peace. It was tension. That afternoon, Bailey showed up at my door with 2 iced lemonades and a half-broken smile. "I know you sent it," he said. I didn't answer, just opened the door wider. He walked in, placed a lemonade on my desk, and stood beside me as I scrolled through the online folder, watching the number of anonymous views tick upward. Then, gently, he placed his hand on my shoulder. "They're rattled," he said. "You shook the glass. Now they have to look." And they did, whether they wanted to or not. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote, "Victims don't always whisper. Sometimes they curate exhibitions." The next morning, I sat in homeroom like usual, chin resting in my hand, earbuds silent, but still in place. Then came the voice on the intercom. "Good morning, Wolverines. This is your daily announcement. A reminder to all students that the art corridor is open until Friday. Please check out the powerful photography pieces on display, including those by Senior Noel." My name. Clear. Public. Not as a whisper. But not how I expected. They thought they could contain me within school walls. I made one call that changed the scale. It was nearly midnight when I logged in. The glow of my laptop was the only light in the kitchen, casting shadows across the wood-paneled cabinets and the scorched edges of the apple pie my mom had forgotten in the oven hours earlier. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind where words echo inside your chest before they ever leave your mouth. I clicked the Zoom link. A woman in her late 40s appeared, sensible haircut, warm eyes, a muted teal sweater that looked like it had comforted a lot of people. "Hi, Noelle," she said. "I'm Angela Hughes. I run Bridgeline Youth Advocacy. Bailey mentioned you might reach out." I hadn't told Bailey I'd made the call. He must have seen the restlessness in my eyes and sent a nudge toward the only direction that made sense, forward. Angela didn't start with questions. She started with listening. I told her everything. Not all at once, but like peeling a label off a glass jar slow, with edges that stuck. She nodded, taking notes, but not interrupting. "You've already done more than most adults manage," she said gently. "Now let's make sure it's protected." She walked me through digital security, how to back up files offline, encrypt folders, and store hard copies in different locations. "Documentation isn't drama," she added, her voice steady. "It's protection. Your uncle was right." I blinked. "How did you?" "Bailey said you'd remember that line," she smiled. We spent nearly an hour walking through steps I'd never known I had the right to take, filing a notice with the district, submitting a confidential packet to the local education board, mailing a sealed copy of my evidence to the district attorney's office, Surrey. "Fide." Angela ended the call with a firm voice. "You're not alone, Noelle. And now, you're not invisible either." The kitchen still smelled faintly of scorched cinnamon. My mother had baked the pie earlier that afternoon, humming out of habit but not saying much else. She'd left it out on the stove, untouched, the crust too dark along the edges. I took a small bite. Too sweet. Then bitter. Even sweetness turns bitter, I whispered, when ignored too long. I packed the photos into a thick manila envelope, sealed it with clear tape, and tucked it inside my backpack. Tomorrow, it would go out with the morning mail. Destination: Lane County District Attorney's Office. The school reacted faster than I thought. By Wednesday, students whispered about a staff-only emergency meeting. One of the aides let slip that a reputational risk had been flagged. Savannah walked the halls more cautiously. Carter had been absent for 2 days straight. Even Mr. Holman had taken down the photo display, not out of shame, but maybe to preserve it from being destroyed again. Bailey stayed close but quiet. "You okay?" he asked one morning. "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm not hiding either." That seemed to be enough. On Friday, the wind carried the first hint of spring, damp soil, budding leaves, the subtle shift in Oregon air when seasons start changing hands. I was walking past the school gate when a silver sedan pulled up slowly. A man stepped out, gray blazer, camera bag slung over one shoulder. He wasn't a parent, wasn't a teacher. His shoes were too polished, his eyes too alert. He approached me with a calm voice and a press badge clipped to his pocket. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm looking for Noel Hawthorne." The bell above the cafe door chimed a soft welcome as I stepped inside. It was one of those neighborhood places, worn wooden floors, the constant hum of the espresso machine, and tiny mismatched mugs that never quite fit the saucer. The kind of place where people came to read, think, or forget they were supposed to be somewhere else. Miles was already there, notebook open, a pencil tucked behind one ear. He looked barely older than me, but carried himself like someone who'd watched too much 60 Minutes and still believed in journalism. He stood when he saw me. "Noel?" I nodded, sliding into the booth. Bailey sat beside me, quiet as always but steady, his hand a silent presence on the edge of the table. "I read the anonymous tip," Miles said. "The photos. The documents. It was a lot." "I know. You don't have to speak on the record." I looked down at the chipped ceramic plate in front of me. The waitress had just dropped off a plate of homemade waffles, my order. Same recipe I'd grown up with, but now it tasted different. Sweeter. Fuller. Like it had waited years for someone to actually notice. "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "It's time." I told him everything. Not in a straight line, but in the way memories fall, awkward, looping, true. About the locker room. About the photo wall. About being called a blur. About how it felt to grow up in a family where someone else's light cast shadows you could never step out of. He took notes. But more importantly, he listened. Miles promised not to publish my name or photo unless I gave him the green light. I hesitated for half a moment, then said, "Put my name. Noel Hawthorne. That's the truth I live in." He smiled, soft and sincere. "Then that's how I'll write it." The article went live 2 days later. It wasn't flashy. No clickbait. Just a title. "The girl in the background tells her story." By noon, it had been shared over 3,000 times. By dinner, it was on the local news. By bedtime, my inbox had 4 dozen emails, most from strangers. And one from a mother. Just a few lines. My daughter went through the same thing. They made her believe it was her fault. "You owe them more than silence. Keep going. Please." I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone like it was something sacred. Like her words had wrapped around my ribs and tugged them into place. Bailey came by with more printouts. "The district's reviewing policy now," he said. "They can't ignore it anymore." I didn't reply, just nodded, letting the sound of progress, of slow, stumbling justice, settle into the corners of my room. The next morning, I found it, spray painted in red across the sidewalk in front of school. Liar. Big. Slanted. Dripping like it hadn't fully dried. No one stood nearby. No cameras. Just silence. But it didn't sting like it might have before. Not because it wasn't cruel, but because it was so clearly the act of someone desperate to silence what had already been said. I didn't step over it. I walked through it. Bonus moment. That evening I made waffles again. Same batter, same pan, same little puddle of syrup in the center of the plate. But the bite tasted different. Lighter. Like finally being heard had added something I didn't know was missing. They sent a letter asking me to stop talking. I pinned it to my wall. It came in a manila envelope. No return address, just the school district seal pressed onto the corner like a final warning. My mother found it first, slipped into the mailbox between an electric bill and a coupon flyer for deli meat. She didn't open it, but her lips pressed together the way they used to when Savannah came home with a B on her transcript. I took it from her hands gently, with a thank you that made her flinch, though I wasn't sure why. Inside the envelope, the tone was cold, clipped, and laced with what they probably thought was civility. We are concerned that certain public statements attributed to you may constitute defamatory claims. We request that you refrain from further commentary while internal matters are under review. I didn't scream. I didn't call Bailey. I walked to my desk, thumbtacked the letter above my monitor, and stared at it like it was a painting. It looked like surrender. But to me, it felt like proof. Jude came over that evening. He wasn't much older than Savannah, but had the kind of eyes that didn't blink when things got awkward. A volunteer with the Student Justice Initiative, recommended by Angela. He wore corduroy pants and a tie that didn't match his shirt, and he smelled like chalk dust and too much coffee. He sat cross-legged on my floor, flipping through binders of photos and notes like a man flipping a tarot deck. "You're organized," he said, tapping a sheet with his pen. "Timeline's solid. Documentation's gold. But we need to be smart." My fingers itched over the keyboard. I'm not trying to sue them. I just want them to stop acting like it never happened. Jude nodded. And to do that, we don't yell louder. We publish clearer. Mom hovered near the doorway. She didn't speak, but her eyes scanned every page, every stapled printout, like she was looking for a trapdoor. When Jude left, she cornered me in the kitchen. The fridge hummed behind her, and her hand gripped a tea towel like it was going to run away. "Is this really what you want, Noelle?" I leaned against the counter. "It's not about what I want. It's about what happened." She didn't cry. Not the way some moms would. But her voice cracked just enough to slip under my skin. "Your future. It could change everything. College interviews, applications." I held up the letter. They already changed everything. That night, I wrote again. Not to accuse. Not to name names. Just to testify. I used to think telling stories meant adding drama. Now I know. It's how you remember out loud. It's how you stop things from sinking. I posted it to the same blog I'd used in freshman year to complain about cafeteria lunches. This time, the world showed up. 3 days later, the post had over 9,000 views. A girl from Nevada messaged me, "Thank you." I thought I was overreacting. A man from Idaho wrote, "My niece went through the same. She didn't fight. I wish she had." Someone else simply said, "You make it easier for the rest of us to speak." I saved every message. I read them twice. And then I took every page I'd printed, copies of letters, photos, screen captures, and cut them into strips. Long at first, then thinner, until the paper was just white dust, falling between my fingers. Not to destroy them, to rebuild them differently. Jude called the next morning. His voice was sharper this time. Focused. We need to meet. In person. What's going on? I asked. He paused. Something bigger is happening. And I think you just became more than a case file. The moment I stopped being afraid, others started finding their voices too. The community library smelled faintly of old paperbacks and lemon wood polish. The meeting room had those stackable plastic chairs no one liked, but that night, not a single one was empty. Jude stood near the back with a clipboard. Bailey sat to my right, bouncing his knee under the table. Someone had plugged in a coffee maker. The gurgle and hiss of it became background noise to the rustle of nervous fingers and half-finished sentences. We weren't here to fix everything, just to speak. And sometimes that's where things start. Angela was right. Courage spreads. It's contagious. A girl in a navy sweatshirt went first. She didn't give her name, just her story. They made me sit alone for 3 weeks after I got back from surgery. Said it was easier for the classroom flow. I had to eat lunch facing the wall. Silence. Then a boy leaned forward. My sister wears a hearing aid. One teacher used to talk with his back turned on purpose. Said if she couldn't keep up, maybe she wasn't cut out for AP classes. Jude didn't interrupt. He just nodded, writing everything down with that tiny clicky pen of his. More stories followed. Some quiet, some raw, all real. We had agreed not to film or record. Just notebooks, cookies, and coffee. Community food, someone called it. I'd brought oatmeal cookies, my mom's recipe. The kind with cinnamon and raisins. I hadn't baked them since middle school. Bailey took one and whispered, "Food for courage." We all laughed. Not loudly, but like people who hadn't laughed in a while. Halfway through, Jude stood up. "Here's what happens next," he said. "We're compiling these into a formal grievance for the district. You'll remain anonymous unless you choose otherwise. But your stories will not be buried." A few people clapped. One girl wiped her eyes. Bailey leaned into me. "You made this possible, Noelle." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just passed him another cookie. That night, I got home later than usual. The house was dim, except for the hallway light. Mom had left a note on the fridge, lasagna in the oven. "You're doing a brave thing, Mom." I didn't cry, but my throat caught a little. I sat down with my laptop, intending to update the blog. Instead, I saw a new message in my inbox. Subject line, "I think I was in your photo." The email read, "I saw myself in your story. I didn't realize how much I had buried until now. Can we talk?" It was signed with a name I hadn't heard in over a year. A name I never thought would reach out. Savannah's former best friend. It was a mild afternoon, the kind where the air smells like damp leaves and sidewalk chalk. I waited at the park behind the library, same place where Bailey and I once built a leaf fort in 4th grade. Back then, everything we did was temporary, and somehow that made it safer. Madison arrived 10 minutes late. She wore a gray hoodie and no makeup, her blonde hair tied back in a lazy knot. You wouldn't know she used to be the girl standing next to Savannah in every photo, always perfectly styled, laughing just a little too loud. Now her laugh was quieter and more honest. We sat on a bench near the edge of the pond, far from the kids throwing bread at ducks or couples walking dogs. She offered me a bracelet right away, silver-plated, shaped like half a heart. "I kept the other half," she said, smiling shyly. "Not because we're best friends or anything. Just, I thought you deserved wholeness. Even if it's symbolic." I slipped it onto my wrist. It was warm from her palm. Madison took a breath. Savannah wasn't always this way. But she was never really okay either. She told me stories I hadn't heard before. That Savannah used to get panic attacks before exams. That she once skipped an entire week of school just to avoid a pimple showing up in her yearbook photo. That their sleepovers stopped because Madison dared to post a selfie without filtering Savannah's jawline. She wasn't cruel at first, Madison said. But the moment she realized pleasing your mom meant power, it started to poison her. I looked at the ducks. They'd stopped quacking. Just drifting now, as quiet as the bench we sat on. She told me once, Madison continued, that the worst thing she could imagine was being average. Your mom didn't praise her for kindness, just for grades, appearances, status. Everything she had to earn came with a price. I whispered, and when she saw me stepping out of the background, she panicked. Madison nodded. She needs therapy. She doesn't need enemies. But that doesn't mean you have to save her. The wind stirred between us. Somewhere across the park, a dog barked, breaking the tension. Madison turned toward me, her voice softer now. I walked away from her when I realized I was becoming someone I didn't like. Don't let revenge make you her mirror. She placed a folded slip of paper in my hand. Names of 2 community art groups. They help survivors create, not just retell. You've told your truth. Maybe now it's time to live it. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on proving them wrong, exposing the cracks, forcing them to see what they refused to name. But in that moment, I realized, justice without healing is just another performance. Madison gave me a small nod, stood up, and walked away down the gravel path, her boots crunching like punctuation marks on a sentence I wasn't ready to end. I sat there for a while, watching the water, watching nothing. Then I went home. My bedroom looked the same, books stacked on the floor, fairy lights tangled along the curtain rod, a cup of cold tea from 3 days ago. But something inside me had shifted. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a blank canvas, one of the few I hadn't dared to touch since middle school. I dusted off my old Polaroid camera, replaced the cartridge, held it in my hands like a seed. Not every photo had to be proof. Some could be a beginning. I expected an empty room. What I saw instead was a crowd ready to listen. The plastic chairs squeaked when people sat down. White, stackable, and slightly warped from years of being pushed against folding tables. A printed banner at the front read, Youth Safety Forum, Community Dialogue. It sounded so official. So quiet. But as I stepped into the room, the quiet held weight. Like a collective breath, waiting to be exhaled. Angela was already there, standing near the podium in a navy blazer. Jude adjusted the microphone height, papers in hand. Bailey sat in the second row with a blue hoodie and a quiet smile. Someone had brought coffee. Someone else passed around tissue packets. I wore an old shirt from 10th grade, the one with faded constellations. It had always felt a little tight across the shoulders. But today it fit. Funny how some things still fit, once you've grown. The meeting opened with formalities. A school board representative welcomed everyone, read a statement about valuing student experiences, and asked that comments be respectful. Then the mic was open. My fingers didn't shake when I walked up. Not this time. I'm Noelle Hawthorne, I said. My story isn't special. It's just one of many that got ignored. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke. I talked about being pushed into lockers. About laughing being used as a weapon. About being the punchline of a family dinner. I talked about how documentation saved me when language failed, how a camera lens became my armor. I didn't name names. I just laid out facts, timelines, screenshots, pictures. One by one, others followed. A girl spoke about her gym teacher mocking her weight. A boy described how no one stepped in when slurs were scribbled on his locker. A parent stood up and said, "My daughter came home crying for 3 months before I knew anything was wrong." Every word felt like a stone lifted from someone's chest. The room didn't erupt. It leaned in. In the back row, I noticed her. Savannah. She sat alone, arms folded, face unreadable. She didn't speak, didn't leave, but she stayed, and that meant something. Climax came in a quiet voice. An older board member, gray hair, tired eyes, leaned toward the mic and said, "You've reminded us that silence isn't safety. It's suffocation." They voted, right then and there, to open an independent investigation into the school's response policies. Jude looked over and gave me a subtle nod. Angela whispered as we stood up to leave, "Most stories die in silence, but some make it to the mic." The hallway after the forum was loud, people clapping backs, exchanging names, thanking one another. Some cried. Others just stood there, stunned that someone had finally listened. Bailey hugged me. "Do you feel it?" he said. "What?" He tapped his chest. "Air. Space to breathe." That night, back at school, I went to grab a forgotten water bottle from my locker. The hallway was mostly dark, just the janitor's radio humming somewhere in the gym. Inside my locker, nestled between my notebooks, was a folded envelope. No name, no handwriting I recognized. Just one sentence on a plain scrap of paper. "Thank you." I stared at it longer than I should have, because for the first time, I believed it. It was a Wednesday, the kind where the sun filtered through the library windows just enough to trick you into thinking everything was fine. The quiet hum of laptops, the scent of old textbooks, the occasional whisper from the corner tables, it all felt routine. Until it didn't. Bailey nudged my elbow. "Did you see this?" I glanced at a screen. The student forum. A post marked anonymous, but the words hit like a fingerprint. There's a kind of guilt that doesn't scream. It just follows you. When you hand the car keys to someone you shouldn't have trusted, and then watch what they do with them. I felt my throat close, just slightly. She bled because of me. I didn't stop it. I didn't even flinch. I was too busy being adored. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't touch anything. I just stared. Because even without a name, it was hers. Bailey whispered, "It's her." No doubt. I nodded slowly. And I realized I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. The post continued. "The truth is, I was afraid she'd outgrow me. That her quiet would make people curious. So I laughed louder. I pushed harder. I chose the wrong people to do my dirty work because I thought silence was permission. Around us, a few students read in silence. No whispers. No smirks. Just stillness. And in the stillness, I felt something give. Not forgiveness. But wait. Lifting. The final paragraph stayed with me most. I never said sorry. I'm not saying it now, because I don't deserve her forgiveness. But I hope she knows I finally saw the photo. The one where she's in the background. She was never blurry. I just didn't want to see her. I pulled out the small photo I kept in my notebook. Savannah, looking down, like she was about to fall. I'd never told anyone that was the one I kept. The only one. Because it was the one where she looked human. Bailey leaned closer. "Are you okay?" I said, "I think so." "I don't know." Then I opened a blank email. No subject. No name. Just one sentence. You don't need to undo it. You just need to not repeat it. I stared at it for a long time. The cursor blinked, its steady rhythm like a breath waiting for permission. Then I hit send. And almost instantly, I deleted it from my outbox. Because it wasn't about her reading it. It was about me writing it. The screen reflected both our faces, mine in the present, calm. Hers in the photo beside it, fading slightly at the edges. The town's art center was tucked between a florist and a closed-down diner with peeling red paint. It wasn't grand. The floors creaked, the windows fogged at the corners, and the coffee in the lobby came from an old donated pot. But it felt right. Warm. Honest. That night, the front window carried a simple printed sign. Still here. Photographs of Light, by Noel Hawthorne. No controversy. No blurred bruises or silent screams. Just light. The room held maybe 30 people, most in soft sweaters and kind eyes. Mr. Holman adjusted the lighting with the quiet reverence of someone tuning a piano. Bailey handed out small folded programs, his thumbs stained with printer ink. Somewhere in the back, a group of college students leaned in close to one another, whispering, not in gossip, but in curiosity. And in the second row was my mother. She didn't say much at first, just held the strap of her purse like it might float away if she let go. But she came. And for me, that was louder than applause. The photos hung in a line across 3 portable walls. A birthday cake half-sliced with one candle still burning. A window pane cracked at the corner, sunlight bleeding through. A pair of muddy shoes on a welcome mat. Bailey laughing mid-bite into a chocolate chip cookie. A backyard swing still in motion, no one sitting in it. Each photo bore a caption handwritten on cardstock. This is what survival looks like. One frame held a close-up of a broken teacup, glued back together, tiny seams visible under the glaze. The tag underneath read, not flawless, just loved enough to fix. Guests wandered through slowly. Some smiled. Some blinked too often. And then I felt it. A hand reached for mine. My mother. No words. Just that small, public gesture. Her fingers curled around mine like a ribbon finding its place. Toward the end of the night, a boy no older than 11 tugged at my sleeve. He had freckles and the shy sort of courage I recognized in myself years ago. He paused. Can I take photos too? When I'm sad. The room quieted around us. I knelt to his level and opened my old camera bag. Inside was the Canon with the cracked lens, my first. The one that survived locker rooms, late nights, and quiet declarations typed under dim lamps. I handed it to him. That's the best time to start, I said. He held it like it was made of crystal. And I realized maybe it was. Because sometimes the most delicate things are the ones that teach us how to hold life gently. The morning light spilled across my bedroom floor like watercolor. It was the kind of spring morning that smelled faintly of cut grass and promise. A breeze moved through the open window, brushing the edges of the packed suitcase on my bed. I folded the last sweatshirt slowly. There wasn't much left in the room. Just my favorite notebook, a few postcards from Bailey tucked between pages, and the photo album resting quietly on the nightstand, one I didn't make. Mom had left it on my pillow the night before. Inside, there were no award ceremonies. No stitches. Just ordinary moments. Me stirring batter in the kitchen, tongue half out in concentration. A side profile of me watching the rain. The time I fell asleep with my math book open and she'd snapped a photo, laughing quietly. They weren't perfect shots. The lighting was off. Some were blurry. But I was there. In full view. And for once, not as a subject of pity or proof, just as myself. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened my old blog. The cursor blinked on the last entry. The page still bore headlines from the past, stories that had ignited support, anger, change. All there, archived like a map through shadowed places. I didn't scroll back. I just wrote one line. Healing isn't loud, but it leaves echoes. Then I clicked disable, and it went dark. Bailey arrived with his usual knock, 3 short, 1 long. He carried coffee, 2 bagels, and a tiny potted plant with a sticky note that said, "Grow wherever." We didn't say much during breakfast. We didn't need to. When it was time, he carried my bag down the porch steps and hugged me for a second too long. His voice cracked when he said, "Go show them what quiet strength looks like." A white envelope stuck out of the mailbox. Inside was a letter from Angela's organization. "Thank you for your voice. It carried more than your story. It carried others to safety." No headlines. No drama. Just a thank you. I tucked it between the pages of the photo album. At the bus station, Mom stood beside me. She looked older than I remembered, but lighter somehow. Like something had finally loosened inside her. She didn't cry. Neither did I. "Just before I boarded," she said, "I wish I had seen you sooner." I smiled gently. "You did. Just not all at once." The bus was half empty. I picked the window seat. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. Not because there was nothing to remember, but because what mattered was already packed inside me. Bailey waving in the distance. Mom holding the album to her chest. The town growing smaller in the rearview mirror. In my bag was one final photo. The first I ever took before all of it. A lone tree under a heavy gray sky. I had never framed it, never really looked at it since. But today, I pressed it against the window where sunlight caught it. And for the first time, I realized the sky wasn't just gray. It was about to break open. I am a silent observer of forgotten stories, the small, persistent voices in the noise of life. And Noelle's story really resonated with me. Perhaps what moved me most was how she chose creativity over revenge, purposeful silence over explosive anger. In a world where wounded people are often labeled weak or complicated, Noelle reminded me that sometimes the greatest strength lies in not responding with the same wounds, but in creating light from what was dark. We all have times when we feel like the background of our own lives. But that doesn't mean you're invisible. It just means you haven't found the right frame to show yourself clearly. What about you? Have you ever felt overlooked, forgotten, even in your own family or community? If you've ever experienced it, please share a little with me in the comments. I'd love to hear. If this story brings back a deep memory, a painful but healing journey, leave comment number 1. And where are you watching the video? I'd love to know, to see that I'm not alone in this feeling. If you love stories that are light, emotional, and life-affirming, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next journeys. Thank you for staying until the end of the 16 chapters. We'll see each other again in other stories and maybe in your own.